On December 17th of 1977, eyewitnesses saw a UFO hovering over a park, only to find that it left behind a giant pile of molten metal, which begs the question, what was this metal? Today we're going to deep dive into this strange mystery. Roll intro, or UFO with blinking lights surrounding it in the sky. 4 men in a tiny foreign car. UFO ejecting molten metal, hyper advanced, ultra high engine. 1,000 pounds of molten metal just in this park inexplicably. We're gonna dive right into it, but thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I got more stuff coming, and let me know what more creepy cryptid or spooky UFO stuff you want in the comments. Now, this sighting takes place in Council Bluffs, Iowa, which is actually extraordinarily close to where I grew up. And if I wasn't lazy, right about now it's gonna cut to me being there showing you the site. I brought my microphone. I'm gonna attach it to the stick. Here we are at Big Lake Park. I actually went and I even wore the same clothes as my YouTube video for continuity, because I'm really good at continuity in my videos. Let me show you the park. Here I am with the Big Lake Park sign. It's very important. So in several parts of the video, we will bring up train tracks. There's actually two sets of train tracks. There's the ones that are right there behind me on one side of the big lake, but then if I turn around way back there, there's actually another set of train tracks. The lake is in between a Y of train tracks. So I didn't know this at the time I filmed my video, because I'm doing this after my video because I'm terrible at planning. But yeah, apparently there's two sets of train tracks. So when we get to the train tracks theory, there's two different train tracks that we could be talking about. I just listened to one of the videos and realized I was holding this mic way too close to my face. It was really blown out. I ran to the other side of the big lake. So here's Big Lake. That's Big Lake. Back there on that dike, there's more train tracks, like I was saying. So that's where the other train tracks are. Now, one thing I do have to say about Big Lake is it's split into two. There's that half of the Big Lake, and there's that half of the Big Lake. That's the whole Big Lake. Look, I'm not gonna say too many negative things about the people of Iowa, but these lakes aren't very big. It's really more like a large pond. I wouldn't even classify this as a lake. So behind me is the infamous Big Lake and dike that allegedly got hit by molten metal from a UFO and caught on fire and burnt up most of the grass on the dike, and the fire department had to come and put out. It was back there on that part of the dike, and this is the Big Lake that is actually, it's not very big, it's actually pretty small. This is Big Lake, and that is molten metal dike where aliens dumped molten metal at Big Lake Park. It just really cracks me up that there's a small pond, and not only do the people of Iowa go, this is Big Lake. We're gonna turn it into a park called Big Lake Park. And when you hear Big Lake Park, you would think, oh, I bet it's a huge lake. This is a really small pond. I could swim across this and not be worried about drowning, and I can barely swim. Yeah, I'm currently standing on the part where the two halves of not so big Lake is separated. It's really not that big of a lake. I'm now on the opposite side of Big Lake. You can see my car parked back there. It's not that big of a lake. So I'm over here at the part of the dike where the fire from the molten lava would have happened, right behind me. And they had this giant iron art structure. Council Bluffs, Iowa is known for its really strange and really ugly metal art. But I gotta say, this is actually one of the more pleasant ones. It's actually probably one of the most least ugly ones. And it's kind of cool that they did a big iron art piece just right in front of the dike, which allegedly caught fire due to molten alien metal, which, spoiler alert, was mostly iron. So that's cool. You know, sitting here on this dike where allegedly aliens dumped 1,000 pounds of molten metal, I don't feel anything at all. So that was the lake, I guess. Hopefully I wasn't lazy. Besides police and the fire department, there is 11 eyewitness testimonies of this sighting. Pretty much all the eyewitness testimonies agreed that they either saw a bright red light in the sky or a UFO with blinking lights surrounding it in the sky over Big Lake Park on the night of December 17th, 1977. This sighting takes place around 7:45 p.m., but mind you, it is December, so at 7:45 p.m. in the Midwest, it's pitch black. What, Indy? Gotta pet my dang cat. So let's jump into some of these eyewitness testimonies. One said they saw a bright flash followed by flames that were 8 to 10 feet high over at the park. And when they went to the park, they saw the area covered in molten metal. Two of the witnesses says that they saw an object in the sky that was hovering over the park near treetops, not falling, not moving, and they described it as round with red lights blinking in a sequence around the periphery, which is very classic UFO stuff. One of the most notable accounts comes from Mike Moore and his wife at the time. They were in the park at the time that this happened, driving through it, and they said that they saw something giant, bright, and red in the sky coming down to the park. He quote said, "We saw this big ball of red stuff in the sky falling." At first, he thought maybe it was something having to do with the airport nearby, because Epley Airfield, which is in Omaha, just on the other side of the river in Omaha, Nebraska, he thought maybe it was a plane or a helicopter or something to do with the airport. However, that wasn't the case when they watched it literally come down into the park and catch everything where it landed on fire. And he went on to say that when he saw it coming down, he just said that it looked like a giant ball of fire in the sky, and then the moment it hit, it caught the area around it on fire, and it was this big ball of molten metal. There's also an account from a group of teenagers who were cruising near the park on 16th Street, and they saw that when they looked over about 500 to 600 feet in the air, there was falling straight down a giant big red blob. And they pulled into the park to see what was going on. And they pulled in at the same time as two more of the witnesses, who were Kenny and Carol Drake, who both attested to seeing the exact same thing, giant red thing falling from the sky, landing in the park. And Mike Moore, who was kind of like our main primary witness who's spoken the most about this, his father, who was the assistant fire chief, Jack Moore, was actually the firefighters that respond to the scene about 15 minutes later. And he is one of the main people who took down eyewitness accounts from all the people who came to the park upon seeing what was going on. He was the one who got an eyewitness testimony from the Drakes, for example, and the teenagers, who had, quote, said they had seen something red in the sky as it fell down and landed in the park. There was another couple who would talk about it much later, when Dr. Jacques Vallée came to investigate the situation, and they attested to seeing a bright red object rocket to the ground near Big Lake and slam into it. And they testified that it didn't explode into flames until it hit the ground, and it was just bright and glowing red. So there wasn't any fire. It was just a giant ball of molten metal that was falling, and then the moment it hits the ground, then it explodes into flames as it catches everything on fire. But I've kind of been beating around the bush, so let's talk about this giant pile of molten metal. There are quite a few descriptions of it from the various sources that I found online. Some of the sources said it was 35 to 50 pounds. Another one of the sources says it was between 1 to 2,000 pounds. Those are very different numbers. However, it was described as being very thick and about 4 foot by 6 foot wide. So, I mean, if we're talking pure metal, a 4 foot by 6 foot giant thick slab of molten metal as it cools, I more believe in the 1,000 to 2,000 pound account of it, not the 35 to 50 pounds of metal testimony. Like 35 pounds of metal, that'd be almost hardly any metal. Like, it wouldn't be that much. But when they're describing this massive blob, 4 foot one way, 6 foot another way, it's molten, it's bubbling, it's thick, that sounds like it'd be heavier than 35 pounds. But one of the more notable things, this molten metal, upon first discovery, is estimated to have been around 2,000 to 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit in its molten state. So this is incredibly, insanely hot stuff. And one of the other really notable things about this giant blob of molten metal is the fact that there wasn't a crater around it or under it upon cleaning it up. So there's no crater, there's no cratering, which implies that it doesn't come from space. Anything that came down from space that wouldn't burn up in our atmosphere and would make impact would leave a notable crater. Other descriptions of this thing said that the metal was so hot that it looked like blue flash bulbs in the middle of it, and that one of the other firefighters said that at minimum the thinnest it was 4 inches thick. So that's what I'm talking about. This thing isn't thin, it's thick. It's 4 foot by 6 foot. Like, this is a lot of metal. One of the later scientific articles about it said there was about 1,000 pounds of material recovered from the site, which sounds a lot more in line of what I was thinking when I first heard about this. I don't know where the whole like 35 to 50 pounds comes from. It doesn't sound correct, at least to me. Obviously, I wasn't there. I wasn't even born yet. And upon this giant molten metal piece cooling, outside of determining that it wasn't radioactive, almost everybody there took pieces of it. Apparently, obviously, most of it went to scientists to examine it, but most of the people there, both the firefighters and several of the witnesses, took pieces of it, and many of them in later interviews said that it was some kind of metal and you can't break it and you can't bend it. No matter what I try to do, I can't bend it. Jack Moore, our primary witness guy who's talked the most about the event, says, I have pieces of it I keep in my office. You can't break it. You can't bend it. I know it's metal, period, but it's got me beat. So this was some sort of super thick, super strong metal that just came out of the sky, lands in this park, lights the grass in the park on fire, is over 2,000 degrees. It's more than 1,000 pounds of molten metal just in this park inexplicably. So that's kind of the gist of the main encounter. And now we can get into some of the explanations of what this weird molten metal from the sky pile is. Like I said before, we can pretty much rule out that this was just a meteor from space. One, the meteor would have had other substances in it. It wouldn't just be pure metal, and it wouldn't be pure molten metal. The metal would still probably move more or less hard. Not to mention anything that comes from space down into the Earth's atmosphere and wouldn't burn up would have to be going pretty darn fast, be pretty large, and because of all that, it would leave a crater. So it shouldn't be a meteor. A meteor just doesn't make sense based upon all the evidence we have. But this metal was examined. It was examined by 2 people back in the day. First, it was taken to the Griffin Pipe Products Company, and also it was taken to the Ames Laboratory at Iowa State University. The laboratory at Iowa State University said that it was very similar to smelter slag and was very similar to a few operations in eastern Nebraska where they were using auto scrap to make manhole covers. And back then, Griffin Pipe Products as well came to a conclusion that more or less it was just very similar to like a steel iron alloy, and was a pretty common one, and it looked like it was made like normal steel and iron alloy would be made. So it seemed like a pretty normal thing. But the thing that isn't normal, and the thing that both of those 2 places talk about, is the fact that when they found it red lava hot molten, the university said it would have had to been at least 2,000 degrees to be red hot molten in a state where it could actually flow, which eyewitnesses and the fire department and the police all attested to it being so hot that it was flowing kind of like a lava flow. The Griffin Pipe Products said that the Griffin Pipe Products business said that it would have to have been at least 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit for it to flow like that. Both of them tested heating up their samples to see how hot it would have to be to flow like that. So it would be between 2,000 to 2,500 degrees. And the thing was, many people were thinking like maybe this is a hoax, maybe this was some sort of weird prank. But the question was, how do you get like 1,000 pounds of molten iron alloy kept at 2,000 to 2,500 degrees and get it to a park and dump it in a park? Like, that sounds like incredibly hard to do in any capacity. And not only that, this happened on a Saturday, and the 2 places in this region of the Midwest that would have had molten slag didn't operate on Saturdays, so neither of those businesses would have had made any molten iron ore or any molten slag waste product at either of their foundries. Both of them were closed that day. Both of them were not operating that day. So it doesn't make any sense. And also, how would you get it there? There are train tracks that are relatively close by, but what you would take, you'd put it on a train, you somehow keep it molten 2,500 degrees while riding the train, and then you dump it in a park. Why would you do that? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And there's all these eyewitness testimony saying, hey, it came from this guy. It was definitely not just poured onto the ground by somebody. There is this really weird, I gotta throw this in. Where is it at? There's this really weird testimony of 4 men in a tiny foreign car who, before taking off from the park, asked the first eyewitnesses if they saw that thing fall out of the sky too, and then drove away. So there was this theory that the 4 men in the tiny foreign car were responsible for dumping the metal there, and it was their hoax. But you couldn't fit 1,000 pounds of molten iron and 4 dudes in the tiny foreign car and keep the iron at 2,500 degrees. And you couldn't transport 2,500 degree molten iron in that car without like any risks or dangers. Like even if you could fit all of it in there, the car would be so hot. Like that is not a thing. That's not. But yeah, some people believe that it was 4 men in a tiny foreign car who did this. And I just had to throw that in because that is absurd. Another person named Greg Hoskins, who is from Omaha, he also went and got pieces of the metal that were left behind a few days later and took them to a laboratory, but his findings were basically the same. He concluded that the metal was also just metal slag. And both him as well as Mike Moore were convinced that, well, it just seemed like normal metal slag, that it had to have come from the sky and something was going on here, and both of them were convinced that it was from aliens. The original examination of the metal said that it was iron with a small amount of nickel and chromium, but then a later, more advanced examination of the metal was done, and they found that part of it was actually Pepsi. The Pepsi jokes just keep coming. Hello, Indy. Okay, no, but the re-examination found that it was chiefly iron, but with nickel, chromium, magnesium, silicon, and titanium were also present, though it was less than 1% of the metal were those other components. Don't lick the new microphone cover. Oh yeah, if you're wondering what this is, it's a microphone cover. Stop licking it. So what were some of these other explanations for what was going on here? Some people thought that it was... No, let go. Stop it. Some people thought that it was satellite debris. Again, some people thought it was a meteor, but we already talked about why that isn't feasible. Some people thought that it was fallen equipment from an aircraft. Some people thought that it was a hoax perpetrated by using thermite. Some people thought it was a hoax that was just pouring molten metal on the ground in a park, hence the 4 guys in the tiny foreign car. And then finally, some people thought that it was dumped there by aliens. And you might be thinking, well, getting dumped there by aliens doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it actually kind of does if you think futuristically. But I'm going to save the explanation of why that makes sense for last. The whole satellite thing comes from 5 weeks later, Soviet reconnaissance satellites crashed. This was a huge incident. It was on the news everywhere, so people thought maybe the 2 things were connected. Maybe this was part of that satellite that like broke off first and came down, or it was another Soviet satellite that just came down, and as it came down it melted, and then it just landed and melted. But that doesn't really make sense. The whole like re-entry thing and the impact and the no crater, and like scientists say it doesn't make sense. I trust them on just that. Now, there also is theory that maybe it had something to do with the Air Force Base that's nearby, which is the Offutt Air Force Base. But the thing about Offutt Air Force Base, though it's an Air Force Base, it's not really like a whole bunch of fighter jets or advanced aircraft. It's mostly just the home for STRATCOM, which is Strategic Air Command. And it's kind of like the US's base of operations for like strategy and military planning and coordination and all that jazz in the United States, because it's in the middle of the United States. They also have a huge bunker there. Like that's where Bush went during 9/11, because it's the safest place in the United States militarily, just because of its location. It's in like the exact center of the United States. But they were asked about it, and not only did they say they had no idea what it could have been. It didn't have anything to do with them. They weren't even interested in coming to look at it and investigate it, as well as the police and the firefighters at the time also contacted Epley Airfield, which I had mentioned earlier, which is the airport that is also very much nearby. And the airport was like, nothing flew over there, and we haven't had reports of any aircraft having any sort of problems whatsoever. So, well, it's not impossible that some military craft dropped molten metal in Iowa. It's not likely. It seems like that if the military was responsible for this, they probably would have tried to cover it up, but they didn't even seem to care. But I've been teasing you, so finally, let's get to the whole, like, UFO ejecting molten metal theory and why it's actually not the most outlandish theory you've ever heard. Because there's a modern research paper that covers this topic. I will throw the link to that down below if you want to deep dive it, but it's dense and it's a lot. I don't know if I would recommend it, but basically, the researchers in this paper who look into a bunch of like weird metals and weird anomalies. Yeah, there we go. Anomalies like this theorize that there have been actually quite a few sightings like this. I believe around 11 sightings of similar accounts of somebody saying that they see a UFO and it dumps molten metal debris onto the ground throughout the world since the 20th into the 21st century. I'm sorry, it's not 11, it's 9. I just saw that in the notes. I couldn't remember what the exact number was. But the theory goes that there's this hypothetical liquid metal electrical system that could be used to like power and run advanced machinery. This is still purely in the theoretical, hypothetical phase, but we do believe it is possible. It's just not really practical. We don't quite have all the science and technical know how to do it, but using liquid metal in a sort of hyper advanced ultra hot engine is theoretically possible. So the theory goes, and this paper purports that it could be possible that aircraft using this type of theoretical hypothetical engine have it in them, and from time to time the way these engines work, you have to dump some of the molten metal. Basically, once it's ran out of its usability in the engine, you kind of got to dump it and put new stuff in. So they theorized that maybe this was a UFO that ran on this type of engine, dumping its material. And while they don't call it a UFO, they use the term unknown aerial objects. It's pretty evident what they're talking about. They just got to use certain terms so they don't get dogged and they're allowed to actually be a credible scientific paper. But there's a scientific paper on this. They go deeper into all of that. But basically they say there's a hypothetical engine that could run a spacecraft. The spacecraft runs on liquid metal, and occasionally the depleted liquid metal fluids need to be ejected. It would leave behind something very similar to molten slag, and this is exactly what eyewitnesses say they saw happen. A UFO comes down, the UFO is there, it dumps liquid metal onto this park. It's there on the park, all the eyewitnesses come, it's still liquid molten metal. It's in the middle of a park in a place that makes no sense. There would be extremely hard to get liquid molten metal to. And that is still the most plausible explanation, even according to this scientific paper that has happened in the 21st century, re-examining this along with those 9 other happenings of a similar thing. When it boils down to it, specifically 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit boils down to it, we just don't really know exactly what happened or exactly what was going on back in 1977. But what we do know is that there was a giant pile of unexplainable molten metal, and it makes no sense. And still to this day, the explanation that makes the most sense happens to line up with the 11 eyewitness accounts of it coming from the sky, it probably coming from a UFO, and it being molten metal. But thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. I will see you next time. Not from this not very big lake. I definitely won't be coming back here. Bye. By the way, I just want to clarify, I'm not from Iowa. You'd never catch me living in Iowa. My mom's from Iowa though. I love you, Mom. I'm sorry I said that. I didn't mean it. But I mean, she's not from Council Bluffs. And Council Bluffs is pretty stinky. I'm almost back to my car.
big late, my butt.
UFO hovering. I said that's so stupid. I'm gonna try again. All right, we'll just go with that.